Chapter 13. Gunpowder Empires, 16th–18th centuries, Firearms, and Expansion. The Ottoman Empires, the Ottoman Empire, the Safavid Empire, and the Mughal Empire, dominated vast swathes of the world from the 16th to the 18th centuries, profoundly altering the political, military, and cultural landscapes of the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. These empires earned their name from the strategic use of gunpowder technology, which revolutionized warfare, cannons, and artillery on a scale previously unseen. The mastery of gunpowder weapons allowed these empires to expand rapidly, subduing rival powers, fortifying their territories, and reshaping the balance of power in their respective regions. This chapter explores how gunpowder technology transformed these three great empires, from the Ottoman victories at Constantinople and Vienna, to the Safavid consolidation of Persia and the Mughal conquest of the Indian subcontinent. The widespread use of firearms, particularly cannons and muskets, redefined both siege warfare and field battles, creating a new type of empire, one that could project power over vast distances and control diverse populations through superior military strength. However, the rise of these gunpowder empires also brought with it new challenges, including the difficulty of managing large multi-ethnic states and the eventual strain of competing with European powers in the global arms race. The Ottomans, masters of siege warfare and cannons. The Ottoman Empire, which emerged from the remnants of the Byzantine Empire in the late 13th century, became the most successful and enduring of the gunpowder empires. The Ottomans were among the earliest adopters of gunpowder technology, and their ability to integrate it into their military strategies played a key role in their rise to power. Under the leadership of Sultan Mehmed II, the Ottomans captured Constantinople in 1453, marking the end of the Byzantine Empire and solidifying their place as the dominant power in the Eastern Mediterranean. The fall of Constantinople is one of the most famous examples of the transformative power of gunpowder in warfare. The city's formidable walls had withstood centuries of attacks from various invaders, but Mehmed II used massive cannons, including the legendary Basilica cannon, to breach the fortifications. These cannons were capable of firing enormous stone projectiles over long distances, smashing through the thick walls that had protected Constantinople for nearly 1,000 years. After a lengthy siege and repeated bombardments, the Ottomans entered the city, transforming it into Istanbul, the capital of their rapidly expanding empire. Cannons and firearms continue to play a central role in the Ottoman military, particularly in their Janissary Corps, an elite infantry unit composed primarily of Christian boys, conscripted through the Devshirme system. Trained in the use of muskets, cannons and other gunpowder weapons, the Janissaries were instrumental in many Ottoman military victories. Their disciplined formations and effective use of firearms allowed them to dominate battlefields across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. One of the most notable examples of Ottoman military prowess using gunpowder was their victory at the Battle of Mohacs in 1526. Led by Suleiman the Magnificent, the Ottomans decisively defeated the Hungarian army, paving the way for Ottoman expansion into Central Europe. The battle demonstrated the superiority of Ottoman tactics and technology, as the Hungarian forces, still reliant on traditional cavalry and muskets. The Siege of Vienna in 1529, although ultimately unsuccessful, further showcased the extent of Ottoman power. The Ottomans besieged the Habsburg capital with a massive army, equipped with heavy artillery designed to break through the city's defenses. Although they failed to capture Vienna, the siege sent shockwaves through Europe and highlighted the growing dominance of the Ottoman Empire in the 16th century. The Safavids, firearms in the Persian heartland. The Safavid Empire, centered in modern-day Iran, emerged in the early 16th century as a major power in the Islamic world. Founded by Shah Ismail I in 1501, the Safavids established Shia Islam as the state religion, setting themselves apart from their Sunni neighbors, particularly the Ottomans. Although the Safavids were initially slow to adopt gunpowder technology, they eventually recognized its importance in maintaining military parity with the Ottomans and other regional powers. The turning point for the Safavids came during the reign of Shah Abbas I 1-5-8-8-1-6-2-9, who transformed the Safavid military by incorporating firearms and artillery into its ranks. Shah Abbas recognized that to compete with the Ottoman Empire, he needed to modernize his army, which had traditionally relied on cavalry and swords. To this end, he established a standing army known as the Ghulams, composed of slaves trained in the use of firearms and artillery. These new troops were modeled after the Ottoman Janissaries and became a formidable force on the battlefield, but their achievements were compromised. Shah Abbas's reforms enabled the Safavids to reclaim lost territories and strengthen their control over the Persian heartland. One of his most significant victories came at the Battle of Hormuz in 1622, where the Safavid forces, allied with the English East India Company, captured the island of Hormuz from the Portuguese. This victory was achieved through the effective use of artillery and muskets, as well as naval support provided by the English, marking a high point in Safavid military power. The Safavids also used gunpowder technology to defend their empire from the Ottomans, with whom they fought several wars over control of the Caucasus and Mesopotamia. The Battle of Chaldiran in 1514, although a defeat for the Safavids, highlighted the importance of gunpowder in warfare. The Safavids, relying on traditional cavalry tactics, were decisively beaten by the Ottoman forces, who used cannons and muskets to devastating effect. This battle underscored the need for the Safavids to modernize their military, which they eventually did under Shah Abbas. While the Safavid Empire did not achieve the same level of military success as the Ottomans, its adoption of gunpowder technology allowed it to survive as a regional power and maintain its influence in the Persian Gulf and Central Asia. The Safavids' ability to integrate firearms into their military strategy helped them fend off both Ottoman and Uzbek invasions and preserve the independence of the Persian state. The Mughals, artillery, and the conquest of India. In South Asia, the Mughal Empire rose to prominence in the early 16th century, largely thanks to its effective use of gunpowder weapons. The Mughal dynasty was founded by Babur, a descendant of both Genghis Khan and Tamerlane, who brought gunpowder artillery with him when he invaded India in 1526. Babur's victory at the Battle of Panipat, where his much smaller army defeated the forces of the Delhi Sultanate, marked the beginning of Mughal rule in India and demonstrated the transformative power of gunpowder in Indian warfare. At Panipat, Babur used cannons and matchlock muskets to devastating effect, overwhelming the Sultanate's much larger army, which was still reliant on traditional cavalry and war elephants. The Mughal artillery, positioned strategically behind defensive barriers, was able to decimate the advancing forces, leading to a decisive victory. This battle marked the first large-scale use of gunpowder in India, and set the stage for the Mughals to expand their control over much of the subcontinent. Babur's successors, particularly Akbar the Great, continued to rely on gunpowder weapons to consolidate and expand Mughal rule. Akbar, who reigned from 1556 to 1605, is credited with creating one of the most powerful and efficient gunpowder armies in the world. His use of artillery in sieges, particularly the siege of Chittorgarh in 1568, allowed him to conquer well-fortified cities and bring rebellious Rajput states under Mughal control. In addition to its military applications, the Mughals used gunpowder to establish centralized control over their vast and diverse empire. Akbar's ability to integrate firearms into the Mughal military allowed him to suppress revolts and enforce his authority across the subcontinent. His successors, particularly Shah Jahan and Aurangzeb, continued to use gunpowder technology to maintain Mughal dominance, although the empire eventually began to weaken due to internal strife and external pressures. The Mughal Empire, like the Ottomans and Safavids, was a multi-ethnic and multi-religious state that relied on gunpowder technology to maintain control over a diverse and often fractious population. The Mughals' ability to project power through superior weaponry allowed them to rule India for nearly 3 centuries, although the costs of maintaining such a large empire would eventually contribute to its decline in the 18th century. Gunpowder and the transformation of warfare. The widespread adoption of gunpowder weapons by the Ottoman, Safavid and Mughal empires revolutionized warfare and reshaped the geopolitical landscape of Eurasia. Prior to the introduction of firearms, most armies relied on cavalry, archers, and siege engines to wage war. However, gunpowder weapons, particularly cannons and muskets, fundamentally changed the dynamics of both field battles and sieges. One of the most significant impacts of gunpowder was its effect on fortifications. Traditional stone fortresses, which had been nearly impregnable for centuries, were suddenly vulnerable to the firepower of cannons. The ability to bombard walls from a distance made sieges faster and more decisive, as seen in the Ottoman capture of Constantinople and the Mauryan conquest of Indian forts. This forced states to redesign their fortifications, leading to the development of star forts and other forms of bastion fortresses designed to withstand artillery fire. Gunpowder also transformed the composition of armies. The rise of infantry armed with muskets began to eclipse the dominance of cavalry, as foot soldiers with firearms could engage enemies from a distance and break up cavalry charges with coordinated volleys. This shift in military tactics led to the creation of professional standing armies, as rulers realized the importance of maintaining a well-trained and disciplined force capable of using gunpowder weapons effectively. For the Ottoman, Safavid, and Mughal empires, the use of gunpowder weapons allowed them to expand rapidly, but it also came with significant costs. The maintenance of large artillery pieces and standing armies required substantial resources, and the competition to control trade routes and resources often led to costly wars. The gunpowder empires were constantly engaged in conflicts with one another as well as with European powers, whose own mastery of firearms and naval technology would eventually challenge their dominance. The decline of the gunpowder empires. By the 18th century, the power of the Ottoman, Safavid, and Mughal empires began to wane, in part due to the increasing military and technological pressures from Europe. While these empires had been early adopters of gunpowder technology, they were slow to keep pace with the rapid advances in firearms, artillery, and naval technology taking place in Europe. European powers, particularly the British, French, and Dutch, began to assert their dominance in the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean, challenging the territorial and economic control of the gunpowder empires. In the Ottoman Empire, internal decay and external pressures led to a gradual decline, culminating in the loss of territory to European powers throughout the 18th and 19th centuries. The Mughals, weakened by internal rebellions and the rise of regional powers like the Marathas, were unable to resist the growing influence of the British East India Company, which would eventually lead to the colonization of India. The Safavid Empire collapsed in the early 18th century, weakened by internal strife and external invasions. Conclusion. The rise of the gunpowder empires in the 16th century marked a turning point in global history, as the use of firearms, artillery, and cannons transformed warfare and allowed these empires to expand rapidly and dominate vast territories. The Ottoman, Safavid, and Mughal empires were among the first to recognize the military potential of gunpowder, and their ability to integrate it into their armies gave them a decisive advantage over their rivals. However, the dominance of these empires was not permanent. The same gunpowder technology that had allowed them to rise to power would eventually contribute to their decline, as European powers, with their more advanced firearms and naval technology, began to challenge their control over trade routes and territories. The story of the Gunpowder empires is a reminder of how technological advancements can